I watched my daughter-in-law drop a white pill into my champagne flute's reflection in the window. She thought she was being subtle. She thought I was just a senile old man, distracted by the fireworks and the jazz band. She was wrong. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I waited for the perfect moment of chaos, bumped into a waiter, and switched my glass with the man standing next to me. That man was her own father. 3 minutes later, he was convulsing on the floor, and I was standing over him, sipping the clean wine, watching my family crumble. My name is Conrad Sullivan. I just sold my company for $32 million, and tonight I discovered my family would kill to get their hands on it. But they picked the wrong victim. If you have ever been underestimated by the people who are supposed to love you, like this video and subscribe. Let me tell you how I turned their murder plot into their prison sentence. The evening air in the Hamptons was thick with the smell of salt water and expensive perfume. My estate was crowded with 200 guests, people who had come to celebrate my retirement, or more accurately, to see if the old lion had finally lost his teeth. I stood on the raised mahogany deck, looking down at the party. It was supposed to be the crowning achievement of my life. After 40 years of building Sullivan Tech from a garage startup into a logistics empire, I had signed the sale papers that morning. $32 million. The wire transfer was scheduled for Monday morning. That gap between Friday night and Monday morning was the only vulnerability I had left. And my son Jason and his wife Vanessa knew it. I adjusted my silk tie and watched them from the balcony. Jason was by the bar, sweating through his tuxedo, downing a scotch with a shaking hand. He looked like a man walking to the gallows, not a son celebrating his father's success. Vanessa was different. She moved through the crowd like a shark in a koi pond, her red dress cutting a path through the sea of black suits. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold, calculating, constantly darting up toward me. And then there was Gerald, Vanessa's father, a man who had spent his life gambling away rent money and blaming bad luck. He was standing near the podium where I was expected to give my toast, licking his lips, eyeing the expensive spread of seafood, like he had personally paid for it. I walked down the stairs, playing the part they expected. I moved a little slower than necessary. I let my hand tremble slightly as I gripped the railing. I saw Vanessa whisper something to Jason, and he turned away, unable to look at me. That was the first red flag. Jason was weak, but he wasn't usually cruel unless she pushed him. "Conrad, darling." Vanessa purred, appearing at my side with 2 crystal flutes of vintage champagne. "You must be thirsty. You have a big speech to make." I looked at the glasses. They looked identical, bubbles rising in gold liquid. But as I reached for one, I caught her eyes. There was a flash of anticipation there, a hunger that had nothing to do with thirst. I glanced at the French doors behind her. The reflection was faint, but it was there. I saw the memory of what had happened 10 seconds ago replay in my mind. Her hand hovering, a quick flick of the wrist, a small white tablet dissolving instantly into the foam of the glass in her right hand. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said, my voice rasping slightly. I reached out. She offered me the glass in her right hand. The poisoned chalice. I took it. I didn't drink. I held it by the stem, feeling the cold condensation against my fingertips. "Where is your father?" I asked. "He should join us for the toast." Vanessa's smile faltered for a millisecond. "Oh, Gerald is right there. But you know him, he prefers beer." "Nonsense," I said, stepping into the crowd. "Tonight we drink the best." I moved toward the podium. The crowd parted for me. Applause rippled through the garden. I was the man of the hour. The man with the golden parachute. Vanessa stayed close, her eyes fixed on the glass in my hand. She needed me to drink it before I started speaking. She needed the heart attack to look natural, a sudden tragedy in the middle of a celebration. I knew exactly why they were doing this. If I died tonight before the sale finalized and the money went into the Asset Protection Trust, I had set up the company shares would pass directly to Jason as my next of kin. He could cancel the trust, take the cash, and cover whatever massive financial hole they had dug themselves into. I had suspected they were in trouble, but I never imagined they were desperate enough to kill. I approached the podium. Gerald was there holding a half-empty bottle of beer. "Gerald," I boomed, acting the part of the magnanimous host. "Put that swill away. Tonight, we celebrate family." I turned to a passing waiter, feigning a stumble. My shoulder hit his tray. It wasn't a hard hit, just enough to cause a moment of distraction. A few glasses wobbled. A napkin fell. Vanessa gasped and reached out to steady the waiter. Jason looked around in panic. In that split second of confusion, with everyone looking at the waiter, I acted. My hand moved with the precision that had made me a fortune in business. I set my glass down on the high table next to Gerald and picked up the spare champagne flute sitting on the waiter's tray. But I didn't just pick it up. I slid the poisoned glass toward Gerald. It took 2 seconds. When Vanessa turned back, I was holding a glass of champagne. Gerald was holding a glass of champagne. They looked identical. "Here, Gerald," I said, slapping him on the back. "A special vintage. Only the best for the in-laws." Gerald beamed, his greedy eyes lighting up. He didn't question it. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the glass I had offered, the glass his own daughter had prepared for me. "Cheers, Conrad," he said. Vanessa froze. She looked at me. Then she looked at her father. She opened her mouth to speak, but what could she say? "Don't drink that, Dad. I poisoned it." She was trapped in her own silence. I stepped up to the microphone. The feedback whined for a moment, silencing the crowd. I raised my glass. The clean glass. "To family," I said, looking straight at Jason. "To the lengths we go to protect them. And to the truth which always comes out eventually." I drank. Vanessa watched me swallow. Her face was a mask of pure terror. She looked at Gerald. Gerald raised the glass. Vanessa took a step forward, her hand reaching out, but she stopped. If she stopped him, she exposed herself. She had to choose between her father's life and her own freedom. She chose herself. She lowered her hand and watched her father drain the glass. "Bottoms up," Gerald laughed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Smooth. Real smooth. I stood there, feeling the cool night air, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The poison was fast-acting. Digitalis, maybe. Or a concentrated beta blocker. Something that stopped the heart and looked like natural causes in a 70-year-old man. Gerald belched. Then he frowned. He touched his chest, rubbing the fabric of his cheap rental tuxedo. "You okay, Gerald?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I feel a little," he started, but the words slurred. His face went gray, draining of color instantly. He dropped the glass. It shattered on the stone patio, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet garden. Gerald grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. He gasped for air, his eyes bulging, staring at me with confusion, then at Vanessa with a pleading desperation. "Daddy!" Vanessa screamed. It was a scream of guilt, not grief. Gerald collapsed. He hit the ground hard, his body seizing, foam beginning to gather at the corners of his mouth. The crowd screamed. The jazz band stopped playing. "Call 911. Someone shouted. I didn't move. I stood over him, watching the chaos unfold. Vanessa threw herself onto his body, shaking him. "No, no, no," she wailed. "It wasn't supposed to be you. I heard it." It was a whisper buried under the screams of the guests, but I heard it. I leaned in closer, pretending to check his pulse. Jason ran over his face, pale as a sheet. "What happened? What did he eat?" Vanessa looked up at her husband. Her eyes were wild, feral. She grabbed Jason by the lapels of his jacket and hissed low and venomous. "Why is he drinking it?" "You handed him the wrong glass, you idiot." "I wasn't the one who handed it to him," Jason stammered, terrified. "Dad did." I stood up, my face a mask of shock and concern. I looked at my son. I looked at my daughter-in-law. They weren't worried about saving Gerald. They were worried about the narrative. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. They were professional fast. They cut open Gerald's shirt, attaching leads to his chest. "He is in cardiac arrest," one of them shouted. "Clear." They shocked him. His body arched off the stones. Nothing. "What did he take?" the paramedic asked, looking around. "Is he on medication? Does he have a heart condition?" Vanessa stood up. She wiped the tears from her face, and in that movement I saw the transformation. The grieving daughter vanished. The predator returned. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He gave him a drink," she sobbed, turning to the police officer who had just walked onto the patio. "My father was fine." Then Conrad gave him a glass of wine. Conrad has been so confused lately. I blinked. The audacity was breathtaking. She was pivoting. If she couldn't kill me, she would frame me. "What are you saying, ma'am?" the officer asked, taking out his notepad. My father-in-law, Vanessa, cried, leaning into Jason for support. Jason didn't resist. He just looked at the ground. He is 70. He mixes up his medications all the time. He takes strong heart pills. Digoxin. Maybe he dropped his pill in the wrong glass. He's been so senile lately. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. Digoxin. She knew exactly what poison she had used. And now she was claiming it was my prescription, my mistake, my senility. She was trying to turn a murder attempt into an accidental manslaughter charge against the intended victim. "Jason," I said, my voice steady. "Is that true? Do you think I am senile?" Jason looked at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the fear, the debt, the pressure from his wife. He looked at Vanessa, then he looked at me. "Dad, you have been forgetting things," Jason mumbled. "You mixed up your blood pressure meds last week. Remember, he was lying. I had never mixed up a pill in my life." They were building a case right there over the twitching body of his father-in-law. The paramedics loaded Gerald onto the stretcher. He was unconscious, barely clinging to life. "We need to get him to Mount Sinai immediately," the medic said. "Who is riding with him?" "I will," Vanessa said. I stepped forward. "I will come too. He is family." Vanessa glared at me, but she couldn't refuse in front of the police. I needed to be close. I needed to hear what they said when they thought I wasn't listening. And I needed to make sure the evidence didn't disappear. As I climbed into the back of the ambulance, I reached up to my lapel and adjusted the small diamond-studded pin fixed on my collar. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a high-definition camera with audio recording a little gadget from the security divisions of the company I had just sold. I had turned it on the moment I walked out onto the balcony. I had the swap on video. I had the toast. And I had Vanessa's accusation. But they didn't know that. As the ambulance siren wailed, cutting through the night, I looked at Vanessa holding her father's hand. She wasn't praying. She was plotting. I sat back, closing my eyes, pretending to be the tired, confused old man they wanted me to be. Inside, my mind was racing. They had tried to take my life. Now they were trying to take my freedom. Fine, I thought. You want a war? You have one. The hospital waiting room was a landscape of fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. Gerald was in the ICU. The doctors said it was critical. Massive toxicity. His heart had stopped twice. Police officers were taking statements in the corner. I sat in a plastic chair, my tuxedo, feeling like a costume in this sterile environment. Vanessa was talking to a detective, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, gesturing toward me every few seconds. I stood up and walked toward the vending machines, needing to get away from their poisonous whispers. I pulled out my phone. It was a burner, not my main line. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Kovacs," I said, when the line clicked open. Conrad, it's 2 a.m. You're supposed to be retired. I am not retired, I said, watching Jason argue with Vanessa across the room. I am a target. I need you to run a full financial trace on my son and his wife, and find out everything about Gerald's debts. I need to know why they needed me dead tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. I'm on it, Kovacs said. The line went dead. I walked back to the waiting area. The doctor came out looking grim. Family of Gerald Miller. Vanessa rushed forward. Is he alive? He is in a coma, the doctor said. We pumped his stomach. We found high concentrations of digoxin. It caused severe arrhythmia and oxygen deprivation to the brain. If he wakes up, there will be permanent damage. Vanessa covered her face. Jason put his arm around her. Mrs. Sullivan, the doctor continued, lowering his voice. Because of the natures of the poisoning, we have to involve the police. This level of toxicity isn't accidental. It was him, Vanessa shrieked, spinning around to point at me again. Her mask of grief had cracked, revealing the cornered animal underneath. He takes digoxin. Check his medical records. He poisoned my father. The detective walked over to me. Sir, do you take digoxin? I looked at the detective. No, I don't. I take lisinopril for blood pressure. You can call my physician, Dr. Aris, right now. I have never been prescribed heart failure medication. Vanessa paused. She hadn't done her homework. She assumed all old men took the same pills. My dad gets confused. Jason interjected quickly, trying to salvage his wife's lie. He has bottles all over the house. Maybe he picked up an old prescription. Maybe he borrowed some from a friend. It was pathetic. But it was dangerous. They were doubling down. I am tired, I said to the detective. I am 70 years old. I just watched a man collapse. I want to go home. You know where to find me. The detective looked at me, then at the hysterical woman and the sweating husband. He nodded. Go home, Mr. Sullivan. But don't leave town. We will be coming by tomorrow to collect any medication in the house for testing. Thank you, I said. I walked out of the hospital. The cool air hit my face. I didn't go to my car. I hailed a cab. Take me to the Four Seasons, I told the driver. I wasn't going home. Home was a crime scene. Home was a trap. If I went back there, they would plant the pills. They would doctor my medical file. They would finish what they started. I checked into the hotel under a pseudonym I used for hostile takeovers. I went up to the suite, poured myself a drink from the minibar, and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Kovacs. The subject line was just one word, read. I opened it. The numbers were staggering. Gerald didn't just have gambling debts. He owed $2 million to the Russian mob in Brighton Beach. The deadline for payment was Monday. Jason and Vanessa were listed as guarantors on a series of shell company loans that were currently under audit by the IRS. They had embezzled $500,000 from one of my subsidiaries before I sold it. Monday. Everything pointed to Monday. If I was alive on Monday, the sale closed. The money went into the trust. The audit would expose the embezzlement. The Russians would come for Gerald. And Jason and Vanessa would go to federal prison. If I died tonight, the sale would pause. The audit would freeze. As executor, Jason could access emergency funds. He could pay the Russians. He could bury the embezzlement. They didn't hate me. They just needed my death to balance their ledger. I took a sip of whiskey. It burned, grounding me. They wanted a senile old man, fine. I would give them one. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed my house. It rang 4 times before Vanessa answered. Hello? Her voice was sharp, anxious. Vanessa. I made my voice tremble. I sounded weak, confused. Vanessa. I don't know where I am. The taxi dropped me off. I think I'm at a hotel. I'm scared, Vanessa. I can't find my pills. I think I did something bad. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing change. She covered the mouthpiece, but I could hear the muffled excitement as she spoke to Jason. He's cracking. He's confused. This is it. She came back on the line, her voice dripping with fake honey. Oh, Dad. Don't worry, you're just having an episode. Stay right there. Tell me which hotel. Jason and I will come get you. We'll bring the lawyer. We need to sign some papers to make sure you're protected. You know, in case you get confused again. Power of attorney. They were going for the power of attorney. I am at the Four Seasons, I whispered. Room 402. Please hurry. I don't want to go to jail. We're coming, Dad. Just sit tight. Don't talk to anyone. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The tired old man vanished. Conrad Sullivan, the corporate raider, stared back. I called Winston, my personal attorney. Winston, wake up. I need you at the Four Seasons in 20 minutes. Bring the police commissioner. Yes, the commissioner. Tell him I have a confession to a murder attempt, and I'm serving it on a silver platter. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink. Let them come. Let them bring their papers. I was about to sign the most expensive autograph of their lives. The doctor pushed through the swinging double doors of the emergency ward, his face a mask of professional gravity that told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. The fluorescent lights of the waiting room hummed with a low, irritating buzz, a stark contrast to the jazz music and ocean breeze we had left behind at the estate. I sat in a hard plastic chair, smoothing the fabric of my tuxedo trousers, watching my family. Vanessa was pacing her heels, clicking a frantic rhythm on the linoleum, while Jason sat with his head in his hands, looking like a man who wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. Family of Gerald, the doctor asked, scanning the room. Vanessa rushed forward, grabbing the doctor's arm with a desperation that might have been convincing to anyone who hadn't watched her drop a pill into a champagne flute an hour earlier. Is he alive? Please tell me he is alive. He is stable for the moment, the doctor said, but his tone remained flat, unyielding. We managed to stabilize his heart rhythm, but the toxicity levels in his blood are alarming. We have administered Digibind to neutralize the poison, but he is in a coma. The next 24 hours will be critical. Poison, Vanessa repeated, her voice pitching up into a shrill register that drew the attention of a passing nurse. What do you mean, poison? My father has a weak heart, but he wasn't poisoned. The doctor looked at her over the rim of his glasses. It wasn't a natural cardiac event, ma'am. It was an overdose. A massive overdose of digoxin. The levels we found in his system are inconsistent with therapeutic use. Someone with his condition would never be prescribed that dosage. It would be lethal. I watched Jason. He flinched at the word lethal. His shoulders hunched closer to his ears, a turtle trying to retract into a shell that no longer existed. He knew. He knew exactly what his wife had done, and he knew exactly who that dosage had been intended for. Because of the nature of the admission, the doctor continued, stepping back slightly. We were required to notify the police. They are on their way. The air in the room shifted. The oxygen seemed to leave the space, replaced by a suffocating tension. This was the pivot point. I saw the gears turning in Vanessa's mind. She had failed to kill me. She had nearly killed her father. And now the law was involved. She needed a scapegoat, and she needed one fast. She looked at Jason, then she looked at me. Her eyes were dry, hard, and predatory. Police, she whispered, bringing a hand to her mouth in a gesture of theatrical shock. Oh my God. Oh my God, Conrad. She turned on me. The transformation was instantaneous. She wasn't the grieving daughter anymore. She was the concerned, horrified in-law. What did you give him? She demanded, her voice loud enough to carry to the intake desk. I stayed seated, looking up at her with the calm, detached curiosity of a scientist observing a particularly aggressive lab rat. I gave him a glass of champagne, Vanessa. The one you poured. She shook her head violently, tears finally springing to her eyes on command. No. No, I saw you. You were fumbling with your pockets. You took out your pill case. I thought you were taking your blood pressure medication. She spun around to face the doctor. My father-in-law, she said, pointing a trembling finger at me. He is 70 years old. He gets confused. He takes so many pills. He has been mixing them up lately. I didn't speak. I let the silence hang there heavy and thick. I wanted to see how far she would go. I wanted to see the architecture of the trap she was building for me. He has been so forgetful, Vanessa sobbed, leaning into the narrative she was crafting in real time. Last week he forgot where he parked the car. Yesterday he called me by his late wife's name. He must have thought he was taking his own medicine and dropped it in the wrong glass. Or maybe he got confused about whose glass it was. He handed it to my father. I saw him hand it to my father. 2 uniformed officers and a man in a cheap suit walked into the waiting area. The detective. He looked tired, his tie loosened a coffee stain on his shirt cuff. He scanned the scene, the hysterical woman in the red dress, the cowering husband, the old man in the tuxedo sitting stoically in the corner. Who is in charge here? The detective asked. It was him, Vanessa shrieked, rushing toward the detective. It was an accident. I know it was an accident, but he poisoned my father. He is senile. He doesn't know what he is doing half the time. The detective looked at me. Sir, I stood up slowly, letting my joints crack. I didn't defend myself. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse her of attempted murder. Not yet. That card was too valuable to play in a hospital waiting room without a lawyer present. I am Conrad Sullivan. I said, my voice steady, deep, the voice that had commanded boardrooms for 4 decades. I do not take digoxin. I have never taken digoxin. My physician is Dr. Eris. You are welcome to call him. Vanessa didn't miss a beat. He hoards pills, she cried, clinging to the detective's arm. He has bottles of them all over the house. Old prescriptions. Other people's prescriptions. He forgets what they are. He thinks they are vitamins. Ask his son. Ask Jason. This was it. The moment that would define the rest of my life. The moment that would decide whether I had a son or an enemy. The detective turned to Jason. Jason was still sitting, staring at the scuffed pattern of the linoleum floor. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner's axe. Sir, the detective asked, is this true? Does your father have a history of confusion? Has he been mixing up medications? I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had sat with through fevers and heartbreaks. The boy I had put through private schools and Ivy League universities. I willed him to look at me. I willed him to find a shred of the integrity I had tried to instill in him. Jason raised his head. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. In that brief connection, I saw the abyss. I saw the debt. I saw the fear of his wife. I saw the weakness that had rotted his soul from the inside out. He looked away. He looked at the detective. Yes, Jason whispered. I felt a physical blow to my chest, harder than any heart attack could have been. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a dull, heavy impact like a door slamming shut on a lifetime of love. Speak up, son, the detective said. Jason cleared his throat. He didn't look at me. He looked at Vanessa, seeking her approval, seeking safety in her corruption. Yes, he said louder this time. My dad. He hasn't been himself lately. He gets confused. He forgets things. We have been worried about him living alone in that big house. He mixes up his pills. We've found loose tablets on the counter before. There it was. The checkmate. Or so they thought. I remembered a rainy Sunday afternoon 20 years ago. Jason was 10. We were sitting in the library, a chessboard between us. I was teaching him the basics of sacrifice. Sometimes, Jason, I had told him, you have to give up a piece to win the game. But you never sacrifice your king. He hadn't understood it then. He certainly didn't understand it now. He thought he was sacrificing me, the king, to save himself. But he was wrong. He was the pawn, and he had just sacrificed himself for a queen who would devour him the moment he was no longer useful. My son died in that waiting room. The man sitting there sweating in his tuxedo was a stranger, a hostile entity, a liability. The detective made a note in his pad. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The narrative was taking hold. The confused, wealthy patriarch. The tragic accident. It was clean. It was simple. It solved everyone's problem. I see, the detective said. Mr. Sullivan, I am going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. I checked my watch. It was 3:00 a.m. The drugs in Gerald's system were doing their work. The camera on my lapel had recorded every word of Jason's betrayal. I had what I needed. Going to the station now would be a mistake. I needed to secure my assets. I needed to talk to Winston. I needed to prepare the battlefield. I am not going to the station tonight, I said. Vanessa gasped. See, he is being difficult. He is aggressive. That is part of the dementia. I ignored her. I looked the detective in the eye. I am not under arrest. You have no evidence of a crime, only the hearsay of a distraught daughter and a coerced son. I am 70 years old. I have just witnessed a tragedy. I am exhausted. I am going home. The detective hesitated. He was young, inexperienced with men like me, men who didn't ask for permission. We will need to search the house, the detective said. If there are loose pills, uncontrolled medication, you can get a warrant, I said calmly. Or you can come by tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I will have coffee ready. But right now I am leaving. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Walking away from my son, leaving him there in the clutches of that woman and the mess they had created. I could feel Vanessa's eyes boring into my back, burning with hatred. She had wanted me dead. Now she wanted me institutionalized. She wanted to strip me of my agency, my mind, my legacy. She wanted a war. I would give her a massacre. I walked out of the automatic doors into the cool night air. The ambulance bay was empty now. The sirens were silent. I didn't call Jason's name. I didn't look back. I hailed a cab at the curb. The driver was an older man listening to talk radio. Where to, Mac? Take me to 42 Oak Haven Lane, I said. I wasn't going to a hotel yet. I needed to go home. I needed to see it one last time before they turned it into a prison. I needed to get my emergency phone, the burner I kept in the humidor for situations exactly like this, and I needed to see what they would do when they thought they had won. As the taxi pulled away, I looked out the window at the receding lights of the hospital. My son was back there, the boy I had raised. He was gone. In his place was a coward who had just signed his own death warrant. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. The fog of fatherhood had lifted. I saw them for what they were. Parasites. And you don't negotiate with parasites. You exterminate them. The ride to the estate was quiet. I sat in the dark planning. They would come for me in the morning. They would bring doctors. They would bring lawyers. They would try to gaslight me into believing I was insane. They would try to take my keys, my cards, my dignity. Let them try. They were playing checkers. I had been playing chess since before they were born. I paid the driver and stood at the gates of my home. It looked the same as it had hours ago, grand, imposing a monument to my success. But as I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my dress shoes, it felt different. It felt like a stage set for the final act of a tragedy. I unlocked the front door. The silence of the house was absolute. The party staff had cleaned up and left. The garden was empty. The shattered glass where Gerald had fallen had been swept away, but the stain of the wine remained on the stone, a dark, wet shadow under the moonlight. I went into my study. I opened the humidor. I took out the burner phone. I dialed Kovacs. It rang twice. Yeah. Kovacs' voice was gravel and smoke. It's me, I said. You alive for now. They missed. Gerald took the hit. Gerald. The father, that's messy. It's about to get messier, I said, watching the headlights of Jason's car sweep across the front lawn. They just pulled into the driveway. They are coming to lock me down. What do you need? I need to know why Kovacs. I need the numbers. I need to know why my death tonight was worth life in prison to them. Find the debt. Find the leverage. Dig. Until you hit the bedrock of their desperation. I'm digging, Conrad. Give me a few hours. I hung up. I put the phone back in the humidor. I poured myself a glass of water, sat in my leather armchair, and waited. The front door opened. I heard Vanessa's voice, sharp and commanding. Check the garage. Make sure he didn't take the car. Get his keys. I want all the keys. I heard Jason's footsteps, heavy and hesitant, coming toward the study. I didn't move. I sat there in the dark, the king on his throne, waiting for the pawns to come and try to take my crown. They thought I was a confused old man. They were about to find out that I was the most dangerous thing in that house. The front door clicked shut, sealing the house like a tomb. I sat in the leather armchair of my study, listening to the heavy silence that followed the intrusion. Jason and Vanessa were in the hallway. I could hear the low, urgent murmur of their voices, the sound of coat hangers rattling, the distinct thud of the deadbolt sliding home. I stood up. My knees popped, a reminder of the 70 years I carried on my frame. I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me. I was leaving. I had my burner phone in my pocket, but I needed my wallet, my car, and my distance. I walked out of the study and into the foyer. Jason was standing by the stairs, looking like a man who had just run a marathon in a suit of armor. Vanessa was by the door, her hand still resting on the lock. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. The tear-streaked, hysterical daughter from the hospital was gone. In her place stood the CEO of this hostile takeover. I am going to the hotel, I said, my voice echoing off the marble floors. I don't want to be in this house tonight. I walked to the antique console table where I had kept a crystal bowl for my car keys for 30 years. It was empty. I frowned. I checked the small drawer underneath. Nothing. Just a few old receipts and a spare garage opener. Where are my keys? I asked, turning to them. Vanessa didn't blink. You don't have a car, Conrad. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. I have a vintage Jaguar E-Type and a Mercedes S-Class in the garage. I drove the Mercedes this morning. Where are the keys? You lost them. Vanessa said, her voice calm, flat, terrifyingly reasonable. You lost them 3 days ago. Don't you remember? We looked everywhere. You were so upset. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. This wasn't just theft. This was the script. They were writing the narrative of my dementia in real time, editing my reality to fit their lies. I did not lose them, I said, stepping toward her. I put them in this bowl before I left for the party. Jason flinched as I approached, but Vanessa stood her ground. You are confused, Dad, she said. You shouldn't be driving. Not in your condition. Not after what you did tonight. I looked at Jason. Son, give me the keys. Jason looked at the floor. He rubbed the back of his neck. Dad, maybe it's better if you stay here. You're tired. You've had a long night. I realized then that I wasn't leaving. Not through the front door. Not tonight. Fine, I said. I turned and walked up the grand staircase. If I couldn't drive, I would call a car service. I needed cash. I needed my ID. I went into my master suite. The room felt cold, violated. I walked to the mahogany dresser and opened the top drawer where I kept my wallet and passport. Empty. I pulled the drawer out completely. Nothing. No leather wallet. No passport. No emergency cash clip. I checked the other drawers. My watch case was gone. The Patek Philippe, the Rolex, the Vacheron Constantin, all gone. I spun around. Vanessa was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. She had followed me up. Looking for something, she asked. "My wallet," I said, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice. "And my watches." "Oh, Conrad," she sighed, a sound of exaggerated pity. "You hid them. Remember, you said the maids were stealing from you. You hid your wallet and your watches last week. We have been tearing the house apart, trying to find them for you." I stared at her. It was masterful. Evil, but masterful. If I called the police now, she would tell them I was paranoid, that I hid my own belongings and forgot. She would point to the empty drawers as proof of my declining mental state. "Get out of my room," I said. She didn't move. "I need to make sure you take your medicine," she said. "You've had a very stressful night. Your blood pressure must be through the roof." She walked into the ensuite bathroom. I followed her. On the marble counter sat my prescription bottle of lisinopril. She picked it up and shook it. "Here," she said, popping the cap. "Take one. You need to calm down." She tipped a pill into her palm and held it out to me. It was a small, round, white tablet. It looked exactly like my medication. But my medication had a small imprint on one side. A tiny L. This pill was smooth. I looked at her hand. I looked at her face. She was smiling a tight, encouraging smile that didn't reach her dead eyes. "Take it, Dad," she urged. I took the pill from her palm. I pretended to inspect it, then brought it to my mouth. I placed it on the tip of my tongue, but didn't swallow. Sugar. It dissolved instantly, a burst of saccharine sweetness coating my tongue. It was a breath mint. A cheap sugar-pressed breath mint. They weren't just gaslighting me. They were actively trying to cause a medical event. They knew my blood pressure would be spiking. They knew I needed the real medication. By swapping it with sugar, they were hoping for a stroke. A stroke would be perfect. It would leave me incapacitated, unable to speak, unable to defend myself, but alive enough to sign checks or have a guardian sign them for me. I swallowed the sugar water. I needed them to think they were winning. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said. She relaxed visibly. "Good. Now get some sleep." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Oh, and don't worry about tomorrow. I made some calls. Dr. Thorne is coming at 9 o'clock. "Dr. Thorne?" I asked. "My doctor is Dr. Aris." "Dr. Aris is unavailable." She lied smoothly. "And besides, Dr. Thorne is a specialist, a geriatric psychiatrist. He is going to evaluate you, Conrad. He is going to help us understand why you hurt my father, why you are so confused, why you hide things." She looked at me, and for a second the mask dropped completely. There was no pity in her face, only triumph. "He is going to determine if you are competent to manage your own affairs," she said. "And considering you tried to kill a man tonight because you got confused about a glass of wine, I think we both know what he is going to say." She closed the door. I heard the lock click from the outside. I was a prisoner in my own home. I walked to the window. It was reinforced glass, locked. We were on the second floor. A jump would break a leg, maybe a hip. It wasn't an option. I sat on the edge of the bed. The sugar taste in my mouth was sickening. A geriatric psychiatrist. Dr. Thorne. I knew the name. He was a hired gun in the city, a man who wrote whatever diagnosis the highest bidder required. He appeared in probate courts and custody battles, testifying that rich widows were incompetent, or that abusive fathers were rehabilitated. If Thorne signed a paper declaring me incompetent, Jason would get emergency conservatorship. They would have control of the bank accounts by Monday afternoon. They would intercept the sale proceeds. They would pay off the Russians. And I would be locked away in a facility where the medication would be real, but it wouldn't be for blood pressure. It would be to keep me sedated and silent until I died of natural causes. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. 4:15. They had taken my keys. They had taken my money. They had taken my medicine. They had taken my freedom. But they had made one mistake. They hadn't taken the humidor downstairs, and they didn't know about the safe behind the false panel in my closet. I stood up. I didn't feel tired anymore. The adrenaline was a cold fire in my veins. I walked to the walk-in closet. I pushed aside the rows of Italian suits they thought I would never wear again. I found the loose panel near the floorboards. I pressed the hidden latch. It clicked open. Inside was a small fireproof box. I keyed in the code. 1984. The year I started my company. The year I promised myself I would never be poor or powerless again. The box opened. Inside was a stack of cash, $10,000 in hundreds, a second passport, and a Glock 19 with 2 magazines. I took the cash. I took the gun. I checked the chamber. It was empty. I loaded a magazine and racked the slide. I wasn't going to use it on them. That would be too easy. That would give them exactly what they wanted, a violent, crazy old man. No. The gun was for insurance. The cash was for war. I put the gun in my waistband at the small of my back. I put the cash in my jacket pocket. I went to the bedroom door and listened. Silence. They were downstairs, probably celebrating, probably drinking my scotch and toasting to their victory. I needed to get out. I couldn't wait for the morning. I couldn't wait for Dr. Thorne. I looked at the door hinge. It was an old house. Solid wood doors, brass pins. I took a pen from the nightstand, unscrewed it to get the metal barrel, and knelt by the bottom hinge. It took me 10 minutes of sweating, silent work to tap the pin out. Then the middle hinge. Then the top. I carefully pulled the door away from the frame, opening it from the hinge side. I slipped into the hallway. It was dark. I crept down the stairs, skipping the third step that always creaked. I could hear them in the kitchen. 2 million by Monday. Jason was saying, his voice slurred. We can pay the Russians. We can fix the audit. And the house, Vanessa asked. We sell it. Put him in a home. Pine View. It's cheap. Pine View. A warehouse for the dying. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to the study. I needed the burner phone I had left in the humidor. I slipped inside the dark room. I opened the humidor. The phone was there. I grabbed it. I checked the screen. One new email from Kovacs. It was a PDF. A bank statement. Not mine. Gerald's. I opened it. And there it was. The smoking gun. A transfer of $50,000 from a shell company registered to Jason Sullivan to a private account in the Cayman Islands. The account holder named Dr. Marcus Thorne. They hadn't just hired a doctor. They had bribed him in advance. Premeditated fraud. I smiled in the dark. This wasn't just a conservatorship hearing anymore. This was a RICO case. I had enough. I moved to the French doors that led to the patio. They were locked, but the key was usually kept in the top of the frame. I felt for it. It was there. They had been sloppy. I unlocked the door. I stepped out into the cold night air. I ran. I ran across the lawn, past the spot where Gerald had collapsed, past the pool house, toward the back gate that led to the service road. I didn't stop running until I was a mile away, standing under a streetlight, breathing hard, my chest tight. But it wasn't a heart attack. It was freedom. I pulled out the burner phone and dialed Kovacs. "I'm out," I said. "Good," Kovacs said. "Because I found something else." "The pills in your bathroom, the sugar ones, yeah. I ran a check on Vanessa's credit card history. She bought a pill press machine online 3 weeks ago, and 5 pounds of lactose powder. She made them," I said, realizing the depth of her commitment. "She didn't just swap them. She manufactured counterfeits. She's been planning this for a month, Conrad. She was weaning you off your meds slowly to make you unstable. The confusion you felt last week, the dizziness that wasn't dementia, that was withdrawal. Rage, hot and white, flooded my vision. They hadn't just tried to frame me. They had been poisoning me by omission for weeks. "Meet me at the diner on 4th, I said. "Bring everything you have." I hung up. I looked back toward the hill where my house sat dark and imposing against the stars. They were waiting for morning. They were waiting for a confused old man to come down to breakfast and sign his life away. They were going to be waiting a long time. I started walking toward the highway. The wind bit through my tuxedo shirt, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt only the heat of the reckoning to come. My bedroom door handle didn't turn. I jiggled it thinking it was stuck, but the mechanism was rigid. It wasn't jammed. It was locked from the outside. I pressed my ear against the heavy oak. Silence. They hadn't just locked the door. They had installed a deadbolt while I was at the hospital. In the 2 hours I spent watching a man fight for his life, my son had turned my master suite into a holding cell. I stepped back, looking at the room that had been my sanctuary for 30 years. It felt different now. Smaller. Cold. The air was thick with the realization of my own stupidity. I had let them walk me in here. I had let them close the door. I walked to the window. We were on the 2nd floor. A sheer drop to the stone patio below. No trellis. No ledge. They knew I couldn't jump. At 70, a fall like that wouldn't be an escape. It would be a suicide. I needed a phone. They had taken my smartphone, my wallet, my keys. They thought they had stripped me of every connection to the outside world. But they forgot that I was a man who made his fortune in the 80s, an era where information was physical and paranoia was a survival skill. I walked to the bookshelf in the corner, pushing aside a row of leather-bound encyclopedias I hadn't opened in decades. Behind them sat a cedar humidor. I hadn't smoked since my first bypass surgery, but I kept the box. I opened the lid. The smell of dry tobacco filled the air. I lifted the false bottom. There it was. A burner phone. A cheap prepaid flip phone I kept fully charged for emergencies I hoped would never happen. I flipped it open. The screen glowed with a harsh blue light. 3 bars. I sat on the edge of my bed, the digital clock on the nightstand reading 3:12 a.m. The house was silent, but it was a heavy, watchful silence. I could feel them downstairs, probably drinking my scotch, probably toasting to their victory. They thought the game was over. They thought the old man was contained. I dialed Kovacs. He answered on the 2nd ring. His voice was thick with sleep and cigarette smoke. "Conrad. You better be dying or dead calling me at this hour. I am locked in my bedroom." "Kovacs," I said, my voice steady but low. "They changed the locks. They trapped me." "Trapped you," Kovacs sounded more awake now. "Who, Jason and Vanessa? They are going to bring a shrink in the morning. They are going to certify me incompetent. They want power of attorney." Kovacs let out a low whistle. "That is a bold play. They are rushing it. Usually these things take months of gaslighting. If they are locking you in tonight, they are on a deadline." "That is what I need to know," I whispered, watching the shadow of feet move under the gap in my door. Someone was standing in the hallway listening. I lowered my voice further. "Why tonight? Why did they try to poison me at the party? Why not wait? You think it's about the sale I sold the company this morning?" "Kovacs. $32 million. The wire hits the trust account on Monday. Once it is in the trust, it is locked. I control the interest, but the principal is untouchable. It goes to charity when I die. But if you die before Monday... Kovacs trailed off. If I die before Monday, or if I am declared mentally incompetent before Monday, the sale proceeds bypass the trust. They go to my estate, to my next of kin, to Jason. 32 million liquid cash, Kovacs mused. That is a hell of a motive. But Jason has a trust fund. He gets $10,000 a month. He lives in a house you paid for. Why risk life in prison for money he doesn't strictly need? That is the question, I said. Find the leverage, Kovacs. Find the debt. Find the black hole they are trying to fill. You don't murder your father for luxury. You murder him for survival. Give me an hour, Kovacs said. I will run a deep audit on the father-in-law too. Gerald. He looked sweaty tonight. Do it. Send it to the secure email on this phone. And Kovacs, yeah. If I don't call you by noon, send the police to 42 Oakhaven Lane. Tell them to bring a battering ram. I hung up. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the phone fading to black. I waited. The minutes dragged like hours. 3:30, 3:45, 4:00. I heard footsteps pace back and forth outside my door. Jason. He was guarding me. My son, the jailer. I thought about the day he was born. I thought about the nights I spent rocking him to sleep. I thought about the tuition checks, the car payments, the down payment on his house. I had bought his loyalty 1,000 times over, but apparently the price had gone up. At 4:15 a.m., the phone buzzed in my hand. One new email. I opened it. The screen was small, the text tiny, but the numbers were large enough to stop my heart. It was a credit report. A black market dossier. Subject, Gerald Miller. Status, default. Creditor, the Volkov Syndicate. Brighton Beach. Amount $2,150,000. Due date Monday, 9:00 a.m. I stared at the screen. Gerald wasn't just a gambler. He was a dead man walking. He had borrowed $2 million from the Russian mob, likely promising them a cut of my company sale. He had sold shares he didn't own. I scrolled down. There was a second attachment. Subject, Jason and Vanessa Sullivan. Alert IRS audit pending. Discrepancy, $500,000. I opened the file. It was a forensic accounting of a subsidiary I had let Jason manage, Sullivan Logistics North. He had embezzled $500,000 over the last 2 years. He had funneled it through shell companies registered to Vanessa, and the audit was scheduled for Tuesday. The pieces clicked together with the terrifying precision of a gun being cocked. If I lived until Monday, the money went into the trust. The Russians would kill Gerald. The IRS would audit the subsidiary. Jason and Vanessa would go to federal prison for embezzlement. If I died tonight or was committed tomorrow morning, Jason would get control. He could take the emergency funds. He could pay the Russians. He could plug the hole in the company accounts before the auditors arrived. They needed $3 million in cash untraceable by Monday morning. My death wasn't personal. It was a balance sheet correction. I looked at the red numbers on the screen. They were the price tag on my life. I closed the phone. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was the cold, hard clarity of the boardroom. They wanted a business transaction. Fine. I was about to teach them the first rule of business. Never underestimate the competition. I stood up. I walked to the door. I knelt down and looked at the hinges. They were on the inside. They had locked the deadbolt, but they had forgotten the anatomy of the door. I took a heavy silver pen from my pocket. I positioned it against the bottom of the hinge pin. I wasn't going to wait for the doctor. I wasn't going to wait for the morning. I picked up a bronze statue from the nightstand. I raised it. It was time to renegotiate the terms of my surrender. The heavy oak door didn't creak. It groaned under its own weight as I pulled it away from the frame, the hinge side swinging open like a broken jaw. I held my breath, sweat stinging my eyes, listening for the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Silence. I slipped through the gap. Jason was sitting in a wingback chair at the end of the hall facing my door. His head was lolled back, his mouth open, a line of drool glistening on his chin. My jailer was asleep on the job. It was so typical of my son. He never had the stamina for the hard work, only the appetite for the reward. I looked at him for a long moment, the Glock heavy in the waistband of my trousers. I could have woken him. I could have ended it right there. But that would be mercy, and I was fresh out of mercy. I ghosted past him, my socks silent on the carpet. I went down the back stairs, through the kitchen, and out the service entrance. The cool night air hit me like a physical blow, filling my lungs with oxygen and rage. I didn't look back at the house. I walked. I walked until my legs burned, until I reached the main road where the streetlights hummed, and I flagged down a passing cab. The Metro Diner on 4th Avenue was the kind of place that smelled of bleach, bacon grease, and desperation. It was open 24 hours a day, a sanctuary for insomniacs, shift workers, and people who didn't want to be found. At 5:00 a.m., it was mostly empty. Kovacs was in the back booth facing the door. He looked like a retired prizefighter who had gone 12 rounds with gravity and lost. His face was a map of scars and bad decisions, illuminated by the blue glow of his laptop screen. He didn't smile when I sat down. He just slid a black coffee across the Formica table. "You look like hell." "Conrad," Kovacs grunted. "I feel like a target," I replied, taking a sip. The coffee was bitter and hot. It tasted like life. "Tell me I am wrong, Kovacs. Tell me my family isn't trying to kill me for a balance sheet error." Kovacs closed his laptop and placed a thick manila envelope on the table. He rested his heavy hand on it. "It is worse than we thought," he said, his voice low and gravelly. I ran the numbers on Gerald. I dug deep into the underground ledgers. Your father-in-law isn't just a gambler. He is a whale who beached himself a long time ago. How much, I asked. 2.1 million, Kovacs said. He owes it to the Volkov Syndicate in Brighton Beach. That isn't bank debt, Conrad. That is blood debt. He has been ducking them for months, promising them a big payout. He told them his son-in-law was coming into a fortune. He leveraged your sale before the ink was even dry. I stared at the envelope. Volkov. They didn't send collection letters. They sent men with hammers. The deadline is Monday. Kovacs continued. Noon. If Gerald doesn't have the cash, they aren't going to break his legs. They are going to pour concrete over them and drop him in the East River. So Vanessa is trying to save her father, I said. That explains her desperation. But Jason. My son is weak, but he isn't a killer. Why would he go along with this? Why risk life in prison for his father-in-law's debt? Kovacs pulled a second sheet of paper from the envelope. This one was a forensic accounting spreadsheet. Because Jason isn't doing it for Gerald, Kovacs said. He is doing it for himself. I hacked the books for Sullivan Logistics North, the subsidiary you let him run. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. What did he do? He cooked the books, Conrad. He has been siphoning operating capital for 2 years. He funneled it into a shell consulting firm registered to Vanessa in the Cayman Islands. $500,000. Gone. $500,000. I closed my eyes. I gave him a salary. I gave him a trust fund. And he stole from me anyway. It gets worse, Kovacs said. The IRS audit you scheduled for the merger. It starts Tuesday morning. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a train wreck. The timeline was absolute. Monday noon, the Russians kill Gerald. Tuesday morning, the auditors arrive and send Jason to federal prison for embezzlement. They were cornered rats, both of them. But why kill me tonight? I asked, opening my eyes. Why poison me at the party? Why not just ask for the money I have bailed them out before? Kovacs pointed a thick finger at me. That is the part I didn't understand. You sold the company for $32 million. The wire hits Monday. Why not wait until the money is in your account and then beg forgiveness, or steal it then? Why kill the golden goose before it lays the egg? I leaned back in the booth, the vinyl squeaking. I knew the answer. It was in the fine print of the sale contract, a clause my lawyers had insisted on, a clause called the dead man's switch. It is the trust, I whispered. What, the asset protection trust? I explained, my mind racing. The moment that $32 million hits my account on Monday morning, it automatically sweeps into an irrevocable trust. It is locked. I can't even touch the principal without a board vote. It is designed to protect the capital from taxes and lawsuits. And Jason knows this, Kovacs asked. He knows I said. He was there when I drafted it. He knows that on Monday morning that money becomes a fortress. He can't beg for it, because I can't give it to him quickly. He can't steal it because it is monitored. But if you die before Monday, Kovacs let the sentence hang in the air. If I die before the sale closes, or if I am declared mentally incompetent, the contract has a contingency clause, I said, the realization tasting like ash in my mouth. The dead man's switch. The sale proceeds bypass the trust and go directly to my estate to settle outstanding obligations. As my next of kin and executor, Jason gets immediate access to the liquid cash. No trust, no board vote, just a $32 million wire transfer into an account he controls. Kovacs whistled low. So they need you dead or committed by Monday morning. If you are alive and sane on Monday, the money gets locked away, the Russians kill Gerald, and the IRS cuffs Jason. Exactly, I said. My death is the only key that opens the lock in time. It wasn't hate. It was math. Cold, brutal arithmetic. They had calculated the value of my life against their debts, and I had come up short. Kovacs looked at me. His eyes were hard. So what is the play, Conrad? You have enough here to go to the cops. Embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted murder. We can bury them. No, I said. Not yet. Why? Because the police are slow, I said. If I go to them now, Jason and Vanessa will lawyer up. They will destroy evidence. They will claim I am senile just like they planned. It will be my word against theirs, and they have a head start. They have the fake pills. They have the narrative. So what do? We let them think they are winning, I said. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 5:30 a.m. They are waking up right now. They are finding my room empty. They are panicking. They need me to sign power of attorney before Monday. They are desperate. I am going to use that desperation. I continued. I am going to give them exactly what they want. You are going to sign the papers, Kovacs asked, frowning. I am going to sign something, I said. But first, I need to make sure they have no way out. I need to close every exit. I pulled a stack of $100 bills from my pocket and dropped them on the table. Kovacs, I need you to do 3 things. First, freeze my credit cards. All of them. Even the emergency black card Jason carries. Second, put a flag on the company accounts. Any withdrawal attempt over $100 triggers a fraud alert. And third, find out where Gerald is hospitalized, I said. And make sure he stays alive. He is the witness. He is the proof. If he dies, the poison disappears with him. He is in Mount Sinai, Kovacs said. But without insurance approval, they might transfer him. Vanessa canceled his policy last month to save cash. Perfect, I said. Let the bills pile up. Let them feel the walls closing in. I stood up. My fatigue was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a CEO facing a hostile takeover, and I was about to execute a poison pill defense that would leave them with nothing but ash. "Where are you going?" Kovacs asked. "I am going to a hotel," I said. "A 5-star hotel. I am going to order room service. I am going to take a nap. And then I am going to make a phone call." "To who?" "To my loving family." I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "I am going to tell them I am confused. I am going to tell them I am scared, and I am going to invite them to come and save me." Kovacs grinned. It was a wolf's grin. "You are going to trap them." "I am going to destroy them," I corrected. I walked out of the diner into the gray dawn. The city was waking up. People were going to work, living their lives, trusting their families. They had no idea how fragile it all was. I checked my burner phone. No missed calls. They didn't know this number existed. I had $32 million, a relentless detective, and the element of surprise. It was time to go to work. The heavy drapes of the Ritz-Carlton suite were drawn tight against the morning sun, creating a twilight gloom that smelled of expensive cleaning products and stale anxiety. I sat in the wingback chair facing the door, a tumbler of amber liquid in my hand. Apple juice, not whiskey. I needed my wits sharp, but I needed to look like a man who had been drinking away his confusion all night. My tie was crooked, my top button undone. I had even splashed a little water on my face to simulate the sheen of a cold sweat. The trap was set. The laptop was closed on the desk, the red glow of the frozen asset alerts hidden from view. Kovacs was in the adjoining room watching the feed from the hidden camera I had positioned on the bookshelf. Winston, my attorney, was in the lobby with the police commissioner waiting for my signal. At 8:45 a.m., a sharp knock rattled the door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the pounding of desperation. Dad Vanessa's voice was muffled by the heavy wood. "Dad, open up." "It's us." I waited a beat, letting the silence stretch, letting their heart rates spike just a little higher. Then I called out, my voice trembling. "It's open!" The door flew inward. Vanessa stormed in first, her eyes scanning the room like a SWAT team clearing a building. She looked like a wreck. Her red dress was stained, her hair a bird's nest of stress, her face pale and drawn. But her eyes were burning with a manic, terrifying energy. Jason followed her. He looked worse. He was gray, sweating his hands, shaking at his sides. Behind them trailed a man I didn't know. A short, oily character in a suit that cost more than his car, clutching a leather briefcase like a life preserver. "The lawyer, Dad." Vanessa rushed toward me, but she didn't hug me. She stopped 3 feet away, assessing me. "You look terrible." I don't feel well, Vanessa," I stammered, clutching the glass with both hands. "My head. The bank. They said no." "Why did they say no?" "Because you triggered a security alert when you ran away," she snapped, dropping the act of the concerned daughter. "You froze everything. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "My father is lying on a gurney in a hallway because the surgeon won't scrub in without a deposit." I shrank back into the chair. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to leave." "We can fix it," the oily lawyer said, stepping forward. He had a voice like sandpaper on silk. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Arthur Clay. Your children called me. We can override the bank freeze immediately, but we need your authorization. Given your condition, the bank will require a designated guardian to verify the transaction." He placed the briefcase on the coffee table and clicked the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet room. He pulled out a thick stack of documents. What is that?" I asked. "It's a temporary measure, Dad." Jason said, his voice cracking. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's just so we can pay the hospital, so we can pay the bills. You're confused. You need us to handle this for you. Just for now. Vanessa snatched the papers from the lawyer and thrust them onto the table in front of me. She uncapped a heavy fountain pen and pressed it into my hand. Sign it, Conrad. Sign it and we can fix the bank. We can save my father. And then you can sleep. We'll take you home. We'll take care of everything. I looked down at the papers. The text was dense legal jargon designed to obfuscate, but the headers were clear enough. Durable power of attorney. Immediate transfer of assets. Revocation of previous trusts. This wasn't temporary. This was a total surrender. It gave them control over the company sale, the bank accounts, the real estate, my medical decisions. It was a death warrant disguised as a contract. I held the pen. My hand shook a deliberate tremor I had practiced in the mirror. I don't know, I whispered. Shouldn't I call Winston? Vanessa shrieked. She slammed her hand on the table, making the papers jump. Winston is part of the problem. He's the one who set up these stupid trusts that lock your money away. We don't have time for Winston. My father has hours, Conrad. Hours? Do you want to be a murderer? I looked at Jason. He was chewing his lip, staring at the pen in my hand. He looked like he was about to be sick. Jason, I asked, do you think I should sign this? Jason looked up. Tears were streaming down his face. He looked at Vanessa, then at the clock. The Russian deadline was looming. The IRS audit was tomorrow. He had no choice. He had dug his grave, and now he was asking me to lie in it with him. Yes, Dad, he whispered. Please, just sign it. I looked back at the paper. I let the pen hover over the signature line. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the table. Oops, I mumbled. My hands, they're so slippery. Vanessa let out a noise of pure frustration. She picked up the pen and jammed it back into my fingers, gripping my hand with her own. Her nails dug into my skin. Hold it, she hissed. Just make a mark, an X, anything. The notary is downstairs. He'll accept it. I held the pen again. I looked at the document. I looked at Vanessa's desperate, hateful face. I need water, I croaked. My throat. I can't swallow. Vanessa groaned. Jason. Get him water. Jason ran to the minibar. He fumbled with a bottle, splashing water into a glass. He brought it to me. I took a sip, deliberately spilling some down my chin. I'm such a mess, I whimpered. I'm useless. You're not useless, Dad. Jason said, his voice thick with guilt. You're just sick, sign, Vanessa yelled. I lowered the pen to the paper. I took a deep breath. I stopped the shaking in my hand. I gripped the pen tight, feeling the metal bite into my fingers. I am right-handed. Everyone knew that. But I switched the pen to my left hand. Vanessa frowned. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I pressed the nib to the paper. I didn't write my name. I didn't write an X. With slow, deliberate strokes using my non-dominant hand to create a jagged, childish scrawl, I wrote 3 words in the signature box. Vanessa watched the ink flow. She was so focused on the act of signing that she didn't read the words until I was finished. She grabbed the paper, pulling it away triumphantly. Finally, she shouted. She looked down at the document to check the signature. She froze. She blinked, bringing the paper closer to her face. The blood drained from her cheeks. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What Jason asked. What did he write? Vanessa looked at me. The triumph was gone. In its place was a dawning, horrific realization. I smiled. I dropped the act. I sat up straight, wiped the water from my chin, and looked her dead in the eye. Read it, Vanessa, I said. My voice was steady, cold, the voice of the CEO. She read it out loud, her voice a whisper of disbelief. I know everything. What Jason asked, stepping forward. Vanessa dropped the paper. She backed away, stumbling over the coffee table. He knows, she whispered. He knows. The door to the adjoining room burst open. Kovacs stepped out, holding a camera. Behind him, the hallway door opened. Winston walked in, flanked by the police commissioner and 4 uniformed officers. The room shrank. The air left it. Mr. Sullivan, Winston said, stepping over the dropped contract. We have the feed. The audio is crystal clear. Attempted fraud, coercion, elder abuse. Vanessa spun around, looking for an exit, but the police blocked the door. Jason collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. The oily lawyer dropped his briefcase and raised his hands in the air. I'm just legal counsel. I didn't know. I stood up. I walked over to the table and picked up the contract. I didn't sign this because I am confused, Vanessa, I said, towering over her cowering form. I signed it to give you exactly enough rope to hang yourself. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror. But the pills, the car. I swapped the pills, I said. I took the car keys. I emptied the accounts. I did it all, because I needed to see how far you would go. I turned to the police commissioner. Commissioner, I said, I would like to press charges. Start with attempted murder for the poisoning of Gerald Miller. Then add fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Jason looked up. Dad, please. I looked at my son. The pawn. I gave you a chance, Jason, I said softly. In the hospital. In the waiting room. I asked you to tell the truth. You chose her. The officers moved in. Handcuffs clicked. The sound was final. As they dragged Vanessa out, she started screaming. Not at me. At Jason. You idiot, you said he was senile. You said he was weak. I watched them go. I watched my family leave in chains. The room was quiet again. Winston looked at me. Are you okay, Conrad? I picked up the glass of apple juice. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. I am fine, Winston, I said. I just closed the deal. The ice in my tumbler had melted, diluting the apple juice until it looked like weak tea. I stared at the laptop screen, watching the notifications roll in like a tide of red ink. It was a beautiful sight. A symphony of financial destruction. Transaction declined. Mount Sinai Hospital. $50,000. Transaction declined. The Volkov Syndicate via Shell Corp Alpha. $100,000. Transaction declined. Uber Black. $50. They were bleeding out. I had applied a tourniquet to my entire fortune, and now I was watching the gangrene set in. My daughter-in-law and my son were stranded in a hospital waiting room, with a dying man, a mob deadline, and plastic cards that were now worth less than the PVC they were printed on. I took a sip of the watered-down juice. It was room temperature. Disgusting. But it kept me sharp. I needed to be sharp. The phone on the mahogany desk began to vibrate. It wasn't a ring. It was a seizure. It danced across the polished wood, buzzing with a frantic, angry energy. Vanessa. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to imagine me dead in a ditch or worse, alive and talking to the feds. I wanted her to feel the absolute terror of losing control. On the 5th ring, I picked up. I didn't say hello. I just breathed into the receiver a shallow rattle of a breath I had practiced in the mirror. Where the hell are you? Her scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It wasn't the voice of a human being. It was the shriek of a banshee. It was raw, primal panic. Conrad. Answer me. The hospital is refusing to operate. My father is dying because your damn cards aren't working. What did you do? Did you call the bank? Did you cancel them? I paused. I let my silence weigh on her. I imagined her in that sterile hallway, her makeup running, her phone clutched in a claw-like grip. Jason pacing behind her, checking his watch, counting down the minutes until the Russians came for them. "Vanessa, I asked, making my voice tremble. I pitched it up an octave, adding a quaver of confusion. "Is that you? Why are you yelling?" "Don't play games with me, old man," she roared. "The doctor says his kidneys are shutting down. He needs dialysis and a blood scrub immediately. They want a deposit. 50,000. The card was declined. Fix it, I don't know how I stammered. My head. Everything is fuzzy, Vanessa. I tried to buy a coffee earlier and the machine beeped at me. I think the bank thinks I'm dead." There was a moment of silence on the other end. A suspended heartbeat, where she processed that information. If the bank thought I was dead, the accounts were frozen pending a death certificate. But I was alive, which meant the freeze was manual. "You froze them," she hissed. "You ran away and you locked us out. You are trying to kill him. You switched the glasses and now you are finishing the job." I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes. It was fascinating how she projected her own crimes onto me. She truly believed she was the victim. She believed that my money was already hers and that my refusal to die was a theft of her property. I didn't mean to, I whined, letting a sob creep into my voice. I was just scared. The police. They were asking so many questions, and Jason looked at me with such hate. I just wanted to go somewhere quiet. I wanted to think. But now, I can't remember the passwords. I can't remember the security codes. "Vanessa, I think my mind is going." I let the statement hang there. It was the bait. The golden ticket. I was validating her narrative. I was admitting that I was the broken, senile invalid she had tried to paint me as. Her breathing changed. It went from hyperventilating rage to a sharp, calculated intake of air. "You can't remember the codes?" she asked, her voice dropping in volume but increasing in intensity. "No," I whispered. "I tried to log in. It asked for my mother's maiden name. I don't remember my mother's name, Vanessa. How can I forget my mother's name?" I started to cry. It was a dry, hacking sound, pathetic and weak. "Listen to me, Conrad," Vanessa said. The rage was gone, replaced by a tone that was even more terrifying. It was the soothing, condescending voice of a nurse speaking to a terminal patient. It was the voice she had used when she handed me the poisoned champagne. "You are having an episode. It's the stress. It's the guilt. You know you hurt my father and your mind is shutting down to protect you. That's why you're confused. That's why you locked the accounts. You're not thinking straight." I sniffled loudly. "I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. I just want this to stop. I don't want to be in charge anymore. It's too much. The company, the money. I keep messing it up." The line was silent for a long beat. I could practically hear her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. The moment she had killed for. The moment she had destroyed her family for. I was offering her the crown. "Dad," she said, and the word dripped with a sickening synthetic sweetness. "Dad, listen to me. You don't have to be in charge. We can help you. Jason and we can take the burden off your shoulders." "How?" I asked. "I can't even pay the hospital." "You need to sign a paper," she said, speaking slowly as if to a child. "A power of attorney. It just means that Jason and I can talk to the bank for you. We can pay the doctors. We can fix the mess you made. And then you can rest. You can go to a nice facility where people will look after you. You won't have to worry about passwords or money ever again." A facility. Pine View. The warehouse for the dying. She was telling me to my face that she was going to lock me away, and she expected me to thank her for it. "That sounds nice," I murmured. "I would like to rest." "Where are you, Conrad?" Tell me where you are. We will come to you. We will bring a lawyer to make sure everything is done right. We will fix this together. I looked at the empty chair opposite me. I imagined her sitting there in handcuffs. I imagined Jason weeping. I am at the Ritz-Carlton, I said. Room 412. I checked in under the name. I think I used Smith. I was trying to be secret agent. Isn't that silly? Oh, Dad, she cooed. That is silly. But don't worry. Stay right there. Don't open the door for anyone but us. Do you understand? We are coming to save you. Hurry, I said, my voice cracking. I think there are people watching me. The TV looks at me funny. I hung up the phone. I dropped the hand holding the device onto the desk and let out a long, steady breath. My heart was beating slow and strong. The adrenaline was a cold current sharpening my senses. They were coming. They were bringing a lawyer. That was perfect. A lawyer meant witnesses. A lawyer meant documents. A lawyer meant that when the trap snapped shut, it would be legally binding. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I inspected my reflection. I looked too healthy. I looked too strong. I messed up my hair, pulling a few strands out of place. I loosened my tie until it hung askew. I unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of my shirt, exposing my neck. I splashed more water on my face, letting it drip down my collar to simulate a cold sweat. I practiced a tremor in my right hand, a rhythmic shaking that traveled up my arm. I looked like a man falling apart. I looked like a victim. I turned to the adjoining door. It was slightly ajar. Did you get that? I asked. Kovac stepped into the doorway. He was holding a specialized recording device, the kind used by federal agents for wiretaps. He adjusted his headphones and nodded. A grim smile cut across his scarred face. Every word he said. I don't want to be in charge anymore. Nice touch. She practically drooled into the phone. Is Winston ready? He is downstairs in the bar, Kovac said. He has the police commissioner with him. They are drinking coffee and waiting for the cue. And the camera. Kovacs pointed to the bookshelf. Hidden between 2 volumes of history was a tiny black lens, no bigger than a pinhead. Rolling in 4K, he said. Audio and video. We will catch the ink drying on the paper. Good, I said. I went back to the chair. I sat down and waited. I thought about Jason. I wondered if he was relieved. I wondered if he thought this was his salvation. He probably told himself that he was doing the right thing. That I was old. That I was sick. That he was just taking control to save the family legacy. He didn't understand that the legacy wasn't the money. The legacy was the name. And he had just dragged the Sullivan name through the mud. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Kovacs, who had retreated into the other room. They are in the lobby. Vanessa Jason and a suit. Looks like Arthur Clay. Sleazebag attorney. Disbarred twice. Arthur Clay. I knew the name. He was a fixer. A man who specialized in making problems disappear for the right price. They had scraped the bottom of the barrel to find someone who would draft a power of attorney on a Sunday morning for a man he hadn't evaluated. Perfect. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. I heard the muffled sound of heels on the carpet. Fast, aggressive steps. I slumped in the chair. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared at a spot on the wall with a vacant, glassy expression. The knock came. 3 sharp raps. Dad. I didn't answer immediately. I let the fear build. I let them wonder if I had died in the chair, if their prize had slipped away at the last second. Dad. Open the door. I stood up, shuffling my feet, dragging my left leg a little. I walked to the door. I unlocked it. I opened it to let the devil in. The door swung open, revealing the 3 of them standing in the hallway like a firing squad waiting for the command. Vanessa was in the lead, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the room behind me instantly for threats or witnesses. When she saw nothing but the empty suite and the drawn curtains, her shoulders dropped an inch, the tension shifting from panic to aggressive determination. Jason stood behind her, his face the color of old ash, sweating through his shirt, despite the hotel's air conditioning, and behind him was the suit. Arthur Clay. He looked exactly as I expected a man who wore expensive clothes to cover the cheapness of his soul, clutching a leather briefcase that I knew contained the instruments of my demise. I didn't greet them. I shuffled backward, my feet dragging on the carpet, my hand trembling as I gripped the doorframe for support. I let my mouth hang open slightly, my eyes darting between them with the confused panic of a trapped animal. I retreated to the center of the room, where I had positioned a wheelchair borrowed from the concierge earlier that morning, claiming a sudden bout of vertigo. I collapsed into it, letting my body go limp, diminishing myself until I was just a pile of old bones and expensive fabric. Vanessa kicked the door shut behind them. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask why I had run. She marched across the room, her heels sinking into the plush carpet, and stood over me. She smelled of fear and hairspray. "You look terrible, Conrad," she said, her voice tight. "You caused us a lot of trouble today. Do you have any idea what is happening at the hospital? My father is lying on a gurney in a hallway because your accounts are frozen." I looked up at her, blinking slowly. I don't remember freezing them, Vanessa. I just wanted to buy a coffee." The machine beeped. It was so loud. She made a noise of disgust, a sharp exhale through her nose. "You triggered a security lockdown when you ran off. The bank thinks you're compromised. They shut everything down. We can't pay the doctors. We can't pay the bills. We can't do anything until you fix this." I shrank back into the wheelchair, pulling my jacket tighter around me. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't have my phone. I don't know the numbers." "We know," she said, her tone shifting into that sickening, patronizing register she used when she thought she had won. "That is why we brought Mr. Clay. He is going to help us help you." The lawyer stepped forward. He placed his briefcase on the low coffee table in front of me and snapped the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet room, like the cocking of a gun. He pulled out a thick stack of documents, the paper crisp and white against the dark wood. "Mr. Sullivan Clay," said, his voice a gravelly purr. "I understand you are having some difficulties with memory and management. Your children are very concerned. These documents are standard procedure in cases like this. They simply allow your son and daughter-in-law to act as your agents to resolve these banking issues immediately." He spread the papers out. I looked down at them. The text was dense, a wall of legalese designed to bury the truth, but the headers were bold and unambiguous. Durable power of attorney. Immediate transfer of assets. Revocation of prior trusts. Emergency medical guardianship. This wasn't just permission to talk to the bank. This was a total surrender. It gave them the right to sell my property, liquidate my stocks, access my offshore accounts, and make medical decisions on my behalf. It was a license to strip me clean and lock me away. I looked at Jason. He was standing by the window, staring out at the city skyline, refusing to look at the scene playing out in the center of the room. He was vibrating with anxiety, his hands opening and closing at his sides. "Jason," I whispered, my voice cracking. Is this what you want?" Jason flinched. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting, painful second, before darting away to look at Vanessa. He looked like a man drowning. "It is for the best, Dad." He mumbled the words, tasting like bile in his mouth. "We just need to handle things for a while. Just until you get better. You're confused. You're sick. We can't let the family lose everything because you aren't yourself." I saw the script Vanessa had fed him. I saw the lies he had swallowed to justify this betrayal. He truly believed, or was trying desperately to believe, that he was saving the family. He didn't realize he was just the getaway driver for his wife's heist. Vanessa snatched a heavy fountain pen from the lawyer's hand. She uncapped it and thrust it toward me. "We don't have time for this emotional nonsense," she snapped. "My father has hours, Conrad. Hours. If we don't get that deposit paid, his kidneys will fail. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be a murderer twice over?" I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. Expensive, heavy, a tool for signing treaties and mergers now being used to sign a death warrant. I should call Winston," I stammered, playing my card. "Winston handles my papers. He knows the accounts." "No," Vanessa shrieked, her composure cracking. She slammed her hand on the table, making the papers jump. "Winston is the problem. He is the one who locked everything up in those trusts. We can't wait for Winston to come back from his weekend golf trip. We need this done now." She moved around the table and knelt beside my wheelchair. She grabbed my right hand, her fingers digging into my skin with bruising force. She wasn't asking anymore. She was forcing. "Sign it, Conrad," she hissed, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were wide, manic, the eyes of a creature backed into a corner. "Sign the papers. Give us the control. And then we will take you home. We will take care of you. You can sleep. You can rest. You won't have to worry about anything ever again. Rest." That was their euphemism for oblivion, for a sedated existence in a cheap facility while they burned through my life's work. I looked at the paper. The signature line was waiting a blank space, demanding my surrender. I looked at the lawyer, who was watching with the dispassionate boredom of a man who had overseen a dozen such extortions. I looked at Jason, who had turned his back again, unable to watch the final blow. My hand shook. I let the tremor travel up my arm, rattling the pen against the paper. "I can't," I whined. My hand. It won't stay still. Vanessa groaned in frustration. She wrapped her hand around mine, guiding the pen to the paper, crushing my fingers against the barrel. "I will help you," she said through gritted teeth. "Just hold the pen. Just make the mark." I felt the heat of her hand. I felt the desperate, frantic energy radiating off her. She was so close to the finish line she could taste it. She thought she had won. She thought she was holding the hand of a broken old man. She had no idea she was holding the hand of the man who was about to destroy her life. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I let my body sag. I stared at the paper, letting my eyes lose focus. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. I just want to rest." "Good," Vanessa breathed. "Sign." I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink bled a small black dot onto the white page. I paused. I waited. I wanted them to feel this moment. I wanted them to remember the silence before the storm. Jason turned around. He was watching now. He couldn't help it. The gravity of the moment pulled him in. "Sign it, Dad," he whispered. "Please." I gripped the pen. I stopped the shaking. I focused my entire will on the tip of that nib. And then, with a clarity that cut through the fog of my performance like a laser, I prepared to write. Not my name, not the surrender they demanded, but the truth that would bury them. The Mont Blanc fountain pen felt like a lead weight in my trembling fingers. I stared at the blank signature line on the power of attorney document, the white paper glaring under the hotel room lights. It was a simple line, a dash of ink that would separate me from my life's work, my freedom, and $32 million. Vanessa was hovering over me, her breath hot and smelling of stale coffee and panic, her hand hovering inches from mine as if she wanted to grab my wrist and force the motion. I let the pen tip hover. I let it shake. I watched a single drop of ink gather at the nib, defying gravity for a second, before falling to splash onto the mahogany table next to the paper. Vanessa hissed. "Careful. Don't ruin the document." I jerked my hand back as if burned, and the pen slipped from my sweaty grip. It clattered onto the glass top of the coffee table, spinning away from me. "I am sorry," I whimpered, shrinking back into the wheelchair. "I am so clumsy today. My fingers, they don't work right." Vanessa let out a guttural growl of frustration. She dove for the pen, scrambling on her knees in her ruined designer dress. As she reached for it, her purse sitting on the floor by the lawyer's feet buzzed. It wasn't a polite vibration. It was a long, angry rattle against the wood floor. She froze. I saw her eyes dart to the bag. I knew what that sound meant. It wasn't a social call. It was a reminder. It was the Volkov Syndicate checking the time. Monday was coming. The deadline was breathing down her neck. She snatched the pen up and ignored the phone, though I saw the way her jaw clenched, the way a vein in her neck pulsed. She thrust the pen back at me. "Just hold it." "Conrad," she snapped, her voice tight with suppressed hysteria. "Hold it and write. We don't have time for this." I took the pen again. I made a show of gripping it with two hands, my knuckles white. I looked at Jason. He was pacing near the window, chewing on his thumbnail, staring at his wife with a mixture of fear and revulsion. He knew the clock was ticking too. He knew about the embezzlement audit. He knew about the Russians. He was watching his life disintegrate in slow motion. "Jason." I called out, my voice weak. "Jason, come help me. I can't steady my hand." Jason stopped pacing. He looked at Vanessa. She nodded sharply. "Get over here," she barked. "Hold the paper." Jason walked over. He smelled of sour sweat. He placed his hands on the edges of the document to hold it flat. His hands were shaking worse than mine. I lowered the pen again. I took a deep breath. I touched the paper, and then I let my grip go slack. The heavy pen slipped through my fingers again, tumbling down into the deep pile of the rug between my feet. "Oh no," I cried. "Oh no, I dropped it again." Vanessa screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure rage. She lunged forward, grabbing me by the lapels of my jacket. "Stop it. Stop stalling. Pick it up." Her phone buzzed again. Longer this time. Two distinct vibrations. A text message. Maybe a picture. Maybe a picture of what happens to people who don't pay $2 million on time. She released me and scrambled for the pen under the wheelchair. While she was down there, I looked at the lawyer, Arthur Clay. He checked his watch, bored. He didn't care about the drama. He just wanted his fee. He had no idea he was standing in the middle of a federal crime scene. Vanessa came up with the pen. Her hair was in her face. She looked deranged. She shoved the pen into my chest. "Sign the paper, Conrad." She whispered, her face inches from mine. "Sign it, or I swear to God I will forge it myself, and then I will smother you with a pillow and tell the police you died in your sleep." I looked into her eyes. I saw it there. The intent. She wasn't bluffing. She was past the point of no return. If I didn't sign, she would kill me right here in the Ritz-Carlton. I took the pen. I nodded slowly, tears welling in my eyes, tears of laughter I had to suppress. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. I will sign. But my right hand. It hurts so much. I think I sprained it when I fell earlier." I held up my right hand, my dominant hand, and let it hang limp and useless. Vanessa stared at it. "Use your other hand," she shrieked. "I don't care. Just put a mark on the page." I nodded obediently. I shifted the pen to my left hand. This was the moment. The pivot. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed for 70 years. My signature is a precise, elegant script that has graced billion-dollar contracts. To sign with my left hand would usually result in an illegible scrawl. But I had been practicing. Not for days, but for years. An old habit from boring board meetings. Ambidexterity was a party trick I never showed anyone. I gripped the pen with my left hand. It felt awkward but strong. I positioned the nib over the signature line. Vanessa leaned in, holding her breath. Jason stopped shaking. The room went silent. They were watching the ink. They were watching their salvation manifest on the page. I started to write. I moved the pen slowly, deliberately. I didn't try to replicate my signature. That would be impossible. Instead, I focused on block letters. Jagged, harsh, distinct block letters. First letter, G. Vanessa frowned. She was expecting a C for Conrad. But she didn't stop me. She probably thought I was writing grandpa or guardian, or just losing my mind completely. She just needed a mark. Any mark. Second letter. A. I paused. I looked up at Jason. He was staring at the paper, his brow furrowed. He was trying to decipher it. Third letter, M. Fourth letter, E. I lifted the pen. I took a breath. I looked at Vanessa. She was vibrating. "Keep going," she hissed. "Finish it." I lowered the pen again. I started a new word. O-V-E-R. I pressed down hard on the final period, twisting the nib into the paper until it tore slightly. "Done," I whispered. Vanessa didn't wait. She didn't check. She snatched the paper from under Jason's hands before the ink was even dry. She clutched it to her chest, closing her eyes, letting out a long, shuddering sigh of relief. "We got it," she breathed. "We got it." She turned to the lawyer, holding the paper out triumphantly. "Notarize it. We need to fax this to the bank immediately." Arthur Clay took the paper. He pulled his notary stamp from his pocket. He looked down at the document to verify the signature block. He froze. He adjusted his glasses. He squinted. He looked at me sitting slumped in the wheelchair. Then he looked back at the paper. "Mrs. Sullivan," the lawyer said, his voice uncertain. "I cannot notarize this." "What?" Vanessa snapped, spinning around. "Why not?" "He signed it." "I saw him sign it." "He signed something," Clay said, holding the paper up to the light. "But that is not a signature. And that is certainly not his name." Vanessa grabbed the paper back from him. She looked at the bottom line. She looked at the jagged left-handed scrawl I had carved into the page. Her eyes widened. Her pupils contracted. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. "G-A-M-E," she whispered, reading the letters as if they were a foreign language. She looked up at me. "Game over," she read. I stopped slumping. I sat up straight in the wheelchair. I reached up and wiped the fake sweat from my forehead. I smoothed my tie. I crossed my legs and leaned back, looking at her with the cold, hard stare of a man who just bought her life for pennies on the dollar. I smiled. "Hello, Vanessa," I said, my voice dropping the waver, returning to its natural, commanding baritone. "Did you really think I would sign my company over to the woman who tried to poison me?" Vanessa dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. Game Over stared back at her in black ink. She backed away, stumbling. You're not confused." I tapped my temple. "Never better, my dear. In fact, I have never been more clear-headed in my life." Jason made a sound like a wounded animal. He looked at the paper, then at me. "Dad," I looked at my son. I saw the realization hit him. He knew. He knew I had played them. He knew I had swapped the glasses. He knew I had taken the keys. He knew I had led them here to this room, to this moment. Vanessa screamed. It was a primal sound of rage. She lunged for me, her fingers curled into claws. "You old bastard! You tricked us!" But she never reached me. The door to the adjoining room burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Kovacs stepped out, a digital camera in his hand. the red recording light blinking steadily. And behind him, the hallway door flew open. Winston walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by the police commissioner and 4 uniformed officers in tactical gear. The room shrank instantly. The air was sucked out of it. Mr. Sullivan Winston said, his voice calm and professional, stepping over the discarded power of attorney document. "We have the feed. The audio is crystal clear. We have the video of the coercion. We have the forgery attempt." Vanessa froze mid-lunge. She looked at the cops. She looked at the lawyer. She looked at the camera. And then she looked at her phone, which was buzzing again on the floor. It was over. But I wasn't done. I stood up from the wheelchair, kicking it backward. I walked toward her, towering over her as the police moved in to surround them. I picked up the paper from the floor. "I told you, Vanessa," I said softly so only she could hear. "I play chess. You were playing Russian roulette." I handed the paper to the police commissioner. "Evidence commissioner," I said. "Along with the pill press you will find in her basement and the offshore accounts my associate has just finished tracing." Vanessa didn't scream this time. She just stared at me, her eyes hollow, her future vanishing before her eyes. I turned to the window. I didn't need to see them put the cuffs on. I could hear the click, and it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The Mont Blanc fountain pen felt like a lead weight in my trembling fingers. I stared at the blank signature line on the power of attorney document, the white paper glaring under the hotel room lights. It was a simple line, a dash of ink that would separate me from my life's work, my freedom, and $32 million. Vanessa was hovering over me, her breath hot and smelling of stale coffee and panic, her hand hovering inches from mine as if she wanted to grab my wrist and force the motion. I let the pen tip hover. I let it shake. I watched a single drop of ink gather at the nib, defying gravity for a second, before falling to splash onto the mahogany table next to the paper. Vanessa hissed, "Careful. Don't ruin the document." I jerked my hand back as if burned, and the pen slipped from my sweaty grip. It clattered onto the glass top of the coffee table, spinning away from me. "I am sorry," I whimpered, shrinking back into the wheelchair. "I am so clumsy today. My fingers, they don't work right." Vanessa let out a guttural growl of frustration. She dove for the pen, scrambling on her knees in her ruined designer dress. As she reached for it, her purse sitting on the floor by the lawyer's feet buzzed. It wasn't a polite vibration. It was a long, angry rattle against the wood floor. She froze. I saw her eyes dart to the bag. I knew what that sound meant. It wasn't a social call. It was a reminder. It was the Volkov Syndicate checking the time. Monday was coming. The deadline was breathing down her neck. She snatched the pen up and ignored the phone, though I saw the way her jaw clenched, the way a vein in her neck pulsed. She thrust the pen back at me. "Just hold it, Conrad," she snapped, her voice tight with suppressed hysteria. "Hold it and write. We don't have time for this." I took the pen again. I made a show of gripping it with 2 hands, my knuckles white. I looked at Jason. He was pacing near the window, chewing on his thumbnail, staring at his wife with a mixture of fear and revulsion. He knew the clock was ticking too. He knew about the embezzlement audit. He knew about the Russians. He was watching his life disintegrate in slow motion. "Jason," I called out, my voice weak. "Jason, come help me. I can't steady my hand." Jason stopped pacing. He looked at Vanessa. She nodded sharply. "Get over here," she barked. "Hold the paper." Jason walked over. He smelled of sour sweat. He placed his hands on the edges of the document to hold it flat. His hands were shaking worse than mine. I lowered the pen again. I took a deep breath. I touched the paper. And then I let my grip go slack. The heavy pen slipped through my fingers again, tumbling down into the deep pile of the rug between my feet. "Oh no," I cried. "Oh no, I dropped it again." Vanessa screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure rage. She lunged forward, grabbing me by the lapels of my jacket. "Stop it! Stop stalling! Pick it up!" Her phone buzzed again. Longer this time. 2 distinct vibrations. A text message. Maybe a picture. Maybe a picture of what happens to people who don't pay $2 million on time. She released me and scrambled for the pen under the wheelchair. While she was down there, I looked at the lawyer, Arthur Clay. He checked his watch, bored. He didn't care about the drama. He just wanted his fee. He had no idea he was standing in the middle of a federal crime scene. Vanessa came up with the pen. Her hair was in her face. She looked deranged. She shoved the pen into my chest. "Sign the paper." "Conrad." She whispered, her face inches from mine. "Sign it, or I swear to God I will forge it myself, and then I will smother you with a pillow and tell the police you died in your sleep." I looked into her eyes. I saw it there. The intent. She wasn't bluffing. She was past the point of no return. If I didn't sign, she would kill me right here in the Ritz-Carlton. I took the pen. I nodded slowly, tears welling in my eyes, tears of laughter I had to suppress. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. I will sign. But my right hand. It hurts so much. I think I sprained it when I fell earlier." I held up my right hand, my dominant hand, and let it hang limp and useless. Vanessa stared at it. "Use your other hand," she shrieked. "I don't care. Just put a mark on the page." I nodded obediently. I shifted the pen to my left hand. This was the moment, the pivot. I am right-handed. I have been right-handed for 70 years. My signature is a precise, elegant script that has graced billion-dollar contracts. To sign with my left hand would usually result in an illegible scrawl. But I had been practicing. Not for days, but for years. An old habit from boring board meetings. Ambidexterity was a party trick I never showed anyone. I gripped the pen with my left hand. It felt awkward, but strong. I positioned the nib over the signature line. Vanessa leaned in, holding her breath. Jason stopped shaking. The room went silent. They were watching the ink. They were watching their salvation manifest on the page. I started to write. I moved the pen slowly, deliberately. I didn't try to replicate my signature. That would be impossible. Instead, I focused on block letters. Jagged, harsh, distinct block letters. First letter. G. Vanessa frowned. She was expecting a C for Conrad. But she didn't stop me. She probably thought I was writing Grandpa or Guardian or just losing my mind completely. She just needed a mark. Any mark. Second letter. A. I paused. I looked up at Jason. He was staring at the paper, his brow furrowed. He was trying to decipher it. Third letter, M. Fourth letter, E. I lifted the pen. I took a breath. I looked at Vanessa. She was vibrating. "Keep going," she hissed. "Finish it." I lowered the pen again. I started a new word. O-V-E-R. I pressed down hard on the final period, twisting the nib into the paper until it tore slightly. "Done," I whispered. Vanessa didn't wait. She didn't check. She snatched the paper from under Jason's hands before the ink was even dry. She clutched it to her chest, closing her eyes, letting out a long, shuddering sigh of relief. "We got it," she breathed. "We got it." She turned to the lawyer holding the paper out triumphantly. "Notarize it. We need to fax this to the bank immediately." Arthur Clay took the paper. He pulled his notary stamp from his pocket. He looked down at the document to verify the signature block. He froze. He adjusted his glasses. He squinted. He looked at me sitting slumped in the wheelchair. Then he looked back at the paper. "Mrs. Sullivan," the lawyer said, his voice uncertain. "I cannot notarize this." What Vanessa snapped, spinning around. "Why not? He signed it." "I saw him sign it." "He signed something," Clay said, holding the paper up to the light. "But that is not a signature. And that is certainly not his name." Vanessa grabbed the paper back from him. She looked at the bottom line. She looked at the jagged left-handed scrawl I had carved into the page. Her eyes widened. Her pupils contracted. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. "G-A-M-E," she whispered, reading the letters as if they were a foreign language. She looked up at me. "Game over," she read. I stopped slumping. I sat up straight in the wheelchair. I reached up and wiped the fake sweat from my forehead. I smoothed my tie. I crossed my legs and leaned back, looking at her with the cold, hard stare of a man who just bought her life for pennies on the dollar. I smiled. "Hello, Vanessa," I said, my voice dropping the waver, returning to its natural, commanding baritone. "Did you really think I would sign my company over to the woman who tried to poison me?" Vanessa dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. Game Over stared back at her in black ink. She backed away, stumbling. You're not confused." I tapped my temple. "Never better, my dear. In fact, I have never been more clear-headed in my life." Jason made a sound like a wounded animal. He looked at the paper, then at me. "Dad." I looked at my son. I saw the realization hit him. He knew. He knew I had played them. He knew I had swapped the glasses. He knew I had taken the keys. He knew I had led them here, to this room, to this moment. Vanessa screamed. It was a primal sound of rage. She lunged for me, her fingers curled into claws. "You old bastard! You tricked us!" But she never reached me. The door to the adjoining room burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Kovacs stepped out, a digital camera in his hand, the red recording light blinking steadily. And behind him, the hallway door flew open. Winston walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by the police commissioner and 4 uniformed officers in tactical gear. The room shrank instantly. The air was sucked out of it. "Mertone," Sullivan Winston said, his voice calm and professional, stepping over the discarded power of attorney document. "We have the feed. The audio is crystal clear. We have the video of the coercion. We have the forgery attempt." Vanessa froze mid-lunge. She looked at the cops. She looked at the lawyer. She looked at the camera. And then she looked at her phone, which was buzzing again on the floor. It was over. But I wasn't done. I stood up from the wheelchair, kicking it backward. I walked toward her, towering over her, as the police moved in to surround them. I picked up the paper from the floor. "I told you, Vanessa," I said softly, so only she could hear. "I play chess. You were playing Russian roulette." I handed the paper to the police commissioner. "Evidence commissioner," I said. "Along with the pill press you will find in her basement and the offshore accounts my associate has just finished tracing." Vanessa didn't scream this time. She just stared at me, her eyes hollow, her future vanishing before her eyes. I turned to the window. I didn't need to see them put the cuffs on. I could hear the click. And it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Vanessa stared at the words "Game Over" written in jagged black ink. Her face went from confusion to a stark, bloodless white. It wasn't just fear. It was the biological shock of a predator realizing it has walked into a cage. She looked up at me, her mouth working silently, trying to form a sentence, an accusation, anything to regain control. But there was no control left to take. The door to the adjoining suite didn't just open. It swung wide with the weight of authority. Winston stepped through first. He wasn't wearing his usual golf attire. He was in a charcoal suit, his face set in the grim lines of a prosecutor. Beside him, filling the frame, was Commissioner O'Malley. I had known O'Malley since he was a beat cop. He didn't do house calls for domestic disputes. He only came out when the crime was big enough to make the evening news. Behind them, 4 uniformed officers filed in, their hands resting near their belts, their eyes locked on Vanessa and Jason. The room seemed to shrink. The air grew heavy, sucked out by the sudden influx of law enforcement. Arthur Clay, the oily lawyer, made a small strangulated noise and backed away until he hit the wall, dropping his briefcase as if it were radioactive. Mr. Sullivan Winston said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "We have secured the perimeter. The feed is secure." Vanessa spun around. "Who are you? You can't be here. This is a private family matter." "It stopped being a family matter when you tried to murder my client," Winston replied calmly. He walked past her, ignoring her outrage as if she were a piece of furniture, and approached the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall. He pulled a remote from his pocket and pointed it at the screen. "What are you talking about?" Jason stammered, standing up from the sofa, his legs shaking so hard he looked like he might collapse. "Murder, no one died. It was an accident. Grandpa had a heart attack." "Sit down, Jason," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. My voice was the only steady thing in the room. Winston pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a fuzzy security camera feed. It was crisp, high-definition 4K video shot from the perspective of my lapel pin. The angle was perfect. It showed the chaotic blur of the party, the colors of the garden, and then centering the frame, Vanessa's hand. The room went deathly silent. On the screen, Vanessa's manicured fingers hovered over a champagne flute. The resolution was so high you could see the condensation on the glass. You could see the small white tablet pinched between her thumb and forefinger. And you could see the moment she let it go, plink. The tablet hit the liquid and dissolved in a fizz of bubbles. Vanessa gasped. It was a sound of pure horror. She watched herself commit the crime. She watched her own hand seal her fate. That's not what it looks like," she whispered, backing away from the screen. That was Sweetener. He likes his champagne sweet." Winston didn't argue. He just clicked the remote again. The image changed. It was a split screen now. On one side, a PDF of a toxicology report from Mount Sinai, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. On the other, a photo of a small, unmarked pill bottle. "This is the toxicology report for Gerald Miller," Winston said, reading from the screen. "Blood concentration of digoxin is 20 times the therapeutic limit. And this," he pointed to the photo of the bottle, "is what Mr. Kovacs recovered from your purse while you were busy screaming at the doctors in the emergency room." Vanessa clutched her handbag to her chest, her eyes darting to the bathroom door where she had left it unattended for 3 minutes. "We ran a chemical analysis on the remaining pills," Winston continued. "They aren't sweetener, Vanessa. They are high-grade digoxin pressed with a lactose binder. The pill press in your basement matches the dye marks on these tablets perfectly." Jason let out a sound that was half sob, half wail. He looked at the screen, then at his wife. The denial he had been clinging to. The desperate hope that this was all a misunderstanding, or a mistake, shattered. He saw the truth. He saw the monster he had married. "You told me it would be painless," Jason whispered, staring at her. "You said he would just go to sleep." Vanessa rounded on him, her eyes blazing. Shut up, you idiot!" "That is a confession," the commissioner said, stepping forward. His voice was deep, authoritative. "Jason Sullivan, you just admitted to conspiracy." Vanessa looked trapped. She looked from the screen to me, to the cops, to the door. There was nowhere to run. The narrative she had built, the lies she had stacked so carefully, were collapsing under the weight of undeniable proof. "It was him," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He switched the glasses. He knew. He let my father drink it. He is the murderer. I stood up. I walked toward her. The officers tensed, but I waved them back. I needed to look her in the eye one last time. I didn't make you buy the poison, Vanessa, I said softly. I didn't make you press the pills. I didn't make you drop it in my glass. I just refused to die. You watched him drink it, she screamed, spittle flying from her lips. You stood there and watched him drink it. I gave you a choice, I said. I asked where Gerald was. I gave you a chance to stop him. But you didn't. You let him drink it because saving him would have meant exposing yourself. You killed your father to save your own skin. She froze. The truth of it hit her. She remembered the moment. She remembered watching Gerald raise the glass. She remembered her own silence. She crumpled. It wasn't a graceful fall. Her legs just gave out and she sank to the carpet, a pile of ruined ambition and red silk. She covered her face with her hands and began to scream a raw, guttural sound of total defeat. Jason slid off the sofa onto his knees. He crawled toward me, grabbing the hem of my trousers. Dad. He wept. Dad, please. I didn't know about the poison. I swear. I just thought we were going to get power of attorney. I didn't know she was going to kill you. I looked down at my son. He was pathetic, a grown man crying on the floor of a hotel room, trying to bargain with the father he had betrayed. You knew enough, Jason, I said, pulling my leg away from his grasp. You knew about the embezzlement. You knew about the Russians. You knew you were stealing my life piece by piece. You didn't pull the trigger, but you bought the gun. I can fix it, he pleaded. I can testify against her. I can tell them everything. Just don't let them take me. Please, Dad. I looked at Winston. Do we have everything? Winston nodded. The wiretap caught the conspiracy charge. The video catches the attempted murder. The financial records prove the motive. It's airtight. Commissioner, I said, turning away from my weeping son. Get them out of my sight. The officers moved in. They pulled Vanessa to her feet. She was limp, sobbing quietly now. They handcuffed her wrists behind her back. The click of the metal was the loudest sound in the room. Then they hauled Jason up. He was begging, pleading, calling for his mother, calling for me. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. I didn't watch them leave. I heard the shuffling of feet, the weeping, the slamming of the door. And then silence. The room was empty except for Winston Kovac and me. The TV screen was still frozen on the image of the pill dropping into the glass. That went well, Kovac said, picking up the bottle of apple juice and sniffing it suspiciously. It went exactly as planned. Winston agreed, packing his remote away. The DA is going to love this. It's a Christmas present wrapped in a bow. I stared at the glass reflection in the window. I looked old. I looked tired. But I was alive. And I was free. What about the lawyer? I asked, gesturing to the briefcase Arthur Clay had left behind in his haste to flee. He's already in custody in the lobby, Winston said. He'll flip on them in 10 minutes to save his license. I nodded. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. It wasn't regret. It was the void left by the family I thought I had. Cancel the trust. Winston, I said, still looking out the window. Sir Winston asked, surprised. The Asset Protection Trust, but that's what saved you. I don't need to protect the assets for them anymore, I said. They aren't inheriting anything. Liquidate the portfolio. Set up a new foundation. Venture capital for young entrepreneurs. Kids who started with nothing like I did. Kids who know the value of $1. And the family? Winston asked gently. I turned around. I don't have a family, Winston. I have a business. And I just fired the non-performing assets. I walked over to the table where the power of attorney document lay, still bearing the jagged, "Game over" scrawl. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and put it in my pocket. "Let's go get a real drink," I said. "I think I've earned it." As we walked out of the hotel room, leaving the wreckage of my former life behind, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man who had just survived a hostile takeover, and I was the only one left standing in the boardroom. The silence in the hotel suite was broken only by the jagged, wet sound of my son weeping. It was a pathetic noise, the sound of a man whose spine had dissolved along with his future. Jason had slid from the sofa to the floor, his knees burying into the plush carpet, his expensive suit bunching around his waist. He crawled toward me, reaching out with shaking hands, trying to grasp the hem of my trousers, like a beggar seeking absolution from a king. "Dad, please," he choked out, his face slick with tears and snot. "You have to believe me. I didn't want to do it. She made me. She said it was the only way." I looked down at him. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. I just watched him unravel. This was the boy I had carried on my shoulders. This was the man I had entrusted with a subsidiary company. Now he was just a creature of instinct, willing to throw his wife to the wolves to save his own skin. "It was her idea," Jason screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Vanessa, who was being boxed in by 2 officers near the window. "She bought the press. She mixed the powder. She told me the Russians were going to kill us if we didn't get the money by Monday. I was scared, Dad. Was just scared." Vanessa's head snapped toward him. The shock on her face morphed instantly into a mask of pure feral hatred. The betrayal cut through her panic like a knife. She had done the dirty work, yes, but she had done it to save them both, and now he was selling her out for a chance at mercy. "You spineless worm!" Vanessa shrieked. Her voice was raw, shredding her throat. "You stood there and watched. You drove the car. You spent the money. Don't you dare put this all on me!" She lunged. It wasn't an escape attempt. It was an attack. She didn't run for the door. She ran for me. Her fingers were curled into claws, her eyes wide and white-rimmed. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to erase the smirk she imagined on my face. She wanted to destroy the source of her failure. She cleared 3 feet before the officers moved. They didn't be gentle. One of them caught her arm, spinning her around, while the other swept her legs. She hit the carpet hard, the breath leaving her lungs in a sharp grunt. "Get off me!" she screamed, kicking and thrashing. "He deserves it. He's evil." The handcuffs clicked. That metallic sound, precise and final, cut through her screaming. They hauled her up, pinning her arms behind her back. She stood there, panting, her hair in her face, glaring at me with enough venom to kill a lesser man. But she was powerless. Just a woman in a ruined dress with a lifetime of bad decisions catching up to her. I turned my attention back to Jason. He was still on his knees, sobbing into his hands, refusing to look at his wife. "She's crazy, Dad," Jason whispered into the carpet. "She manipulated me. I am a victim here, too." That word, victim. It ignited a cold fire in my gut. It was the one lie I could not let stand. I crouched down. My knees protested, but I ignored the pain. I wanted to be on his level. I wanted him to look me in the eye. I reached out and grabbed his chin, forcing his head up. His eyes were red, watery, filled with a desperate, pleading hope. He thought I was softening. He thought the father in me was waking up to save him one last time. He was wrong. The father was dead. The judge was here. "Stop crying," I commanded. My voice was low, hard as granite. He sniffled, trying to compose himself. "Dad, listen to me closely." "Jason," I said, tightening my grip on his jaw, "because this is the last piece of fatherly advice you are ever going to receive." I leaned in my face, inches from his. I smelled the fear on him. "You think you are innocent because you didn't drop the pill. You think you are a victim because she hatched the plan. I didn't know she was going to do it right." Then Jason stammered, "I thought..." "Liar," I cut him off. You knew. You stood on that balcony and watched her pour the champagne. You watched her walk it over to me. I let go of his face and stood up, wiping my hand on my handkerchief as if I had touched something filthy. I didn't swap those glasses to save my life, Jason, I said, my voice projecting to every corner of the room, ensuring the police, the lawyers, and Vanessa heard every word. I knew what was in the glass. I could have just poured it out. I could have called the police right then. Jason stared up at me, confusion clouding his panic. Then why did you give it to Gerald to test you? I said. The room went deadly silent. Even Vanessa stopped struggling against the officers. I swapped the glass with her father to see what you would do. I continued looking down at him with absolute contempt. I wanted to see if you had a single ounce of humanity left. I wanted to see if you would save him. Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You saw me hand that glass to Gerald, I said. You knew it was poisoned. You knew it was meant to stop a heart. And you stood there. You watched an old man, your wife's father, your partner in crime, lift that glass to his lips. I took a step closer, casting my shadow over him. All you had to do was shout. All you had to do was knock it from his hand. If you had saved him, I might have forgiven you. I might have believed you were a victim of her influence. I shook my head slowly. But you didn't. You watched him drink it. You watched him fall. You watched him die on that patio floor, and you said nothing. You calculated that his death was an acceptable loss if it meant you didn't get caught. Jason dropped his head, his shoulders shaking. You aren't a victim, Jason, I said, delivering the final verdict. You aren't a hostage. You are an accomplice. You are a co-conspirator. And in the eyes of the man who raised you, you are a murderer. I turned to the police commissioner. Get him up, I said. The officers hauled Jason to his feet. He didn't fight. He went limp, a puppet whose strings had finally been cut. He didn't look at me again. He stared at the air, his eyes hollow, his soul finally exposed for the vacuum it was. Vanessa was laughing now, a low, broken, hysterical sound. She looked at Jason with pure revulsion. We deserve each other, she spat at him as they dragged her toward the door. I watched them go, my son and his wife, the future of the Sullivan dynasty, marching out in handcuffs to face a cage. When the door closed, the silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. It was the silence of a balance sheet that had finally been corrected. Winston cleared his throat. He looked pale. That was harsh, Conrad. It was necessary, I said. I walked to the minibar and poured the apple juice down the sink. I needed something stronger. I opened a fresh bottle of scotch. I poured 2 glasses. One for me. One for the empty space where my son used to be. It's done, I said. Now let's finish the paperwork. I have a foundation to start. The gavel didn't sound like justice. It sounded like a door slamming on a tomb. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, watching the final act of the tragedy my family had written. Vanessa stood as the judge read the verdict. She didn't scream this time. She didn't fight. She just sagged her spine, finally snapping under the weight of the reality she had created. 25 years. Attempted murder in the first-degree conspiracy, wire fraud, and elder abuse. She wouldn't see the outside of a cell until she was a gray, broken old woman. As the bailiffs took her arms, she didn't look at me. She looked at the empty space where her future used to be. Jason was next. 15 years. Being an accomplice carried a lighter sentence, but the look on his face told me he had already received a life sentence of his own making. He looked back at me one last time before they led him away. His eyes were dry, hollow pits. He mouthed the word sorry, but the sound didn't carry across the room. I didn't nod. I didn't wave. I just watched him vanish through the side door, a ghost of the son I had once loved. And Gerald, the man who started it all, He never made it to court. The lack of oxygen to his brain during those critical minutes on the patio had done permanent damage. He was in a secure ward at the state penitentiary hospital, breathing through a tube, staring at the ceiling, with eyes that saw nothing. He was trapped in a prison of his own flesh, a vegetative monument to greed. The Russians wouldn't bother killing him now. He was already dead. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. Winston was waiting by the car. He held a portfolio in his hands. "It is done, Conrad," he said quietly. "The assets are liquidated. The transfer is ready for your signature." I took the pen. It wasn't the heavy Mont Blanc I had used in the hotel room. It was a simple plastic pen. I opened the portfolio. The check was already printed. $32 million. I signed my name, my real name. My right hand didn't shake. "We are depositing this into the Elena Sullivan Foundation," Winston asked, looking at the check with a mixture of awe and respect. "Yes," I said. "Venture capital for kids who start with nothing. Kids who have hunger but honor. Make sure the board knows that character counts for more than credit scores." Winston nodded, sliding the check into his jacket pocket. "And you, sir, where will you go?" I looked toward the airport. "Somewhere warm, Winston. Somewhere the coffee is strong and the family ties don't strangle you." An hour later, I was settling into the leather seat of a Gulfstream G650. The cabin smelled of new leather and fresh orchids. Across from me sat Eleanor, my former VP of operations, a woman who had retired 5 years ago, but had answered my call yesterday without hesitation. She was the only person I had ever trusted with the books who hadn't stolen a dime. "Ready for the second act?" "Conrad," she asked, smiling over the rim of her reading glasses. I looked out the window as the engines whined to life, pressing us back into our seats. The ground fell away. The city where I had built my empire, raised my son, and buried my wife shrank until it was just a grid of lights and concrete. I reached for the bottle of wine sitting in the ice bucket. It was a 1982 Petrus. I pulled the cork myself. I didn't wait for a flight attendant. I poured the dark ruby liquid into a crystal glass. I watched it swirl, clean and pure. I lifted the glass to the light. There was no sediment, no white powder dissolving in the foam. Just wine. I took a sip. It tasted of dark fruit, earth, and survival. I looked at Eleanor. I looked at the clouds stretching out below us like a white ocean. I wasn't lonely. I was light. I had shed the dead weight of a toxic legacy. I had bought my life back for the low price of everything I owned, and it was the best deal I had ever made. I raised my glass to the reflection in the window, to the old man who refused to die. "To freedom," I whispered. The jet banked toward the horizon, chasing the sun, leaving the shadows far behind. We are raised to believe that family is a sanctuary, an unconditional bond that withstands any storm. But my story proves that for some, family is merely a proximity for parasitism. The hardest truth I had to accept was that my son didn't see a father. He saw a balance sheet. You do not owe your life, your dignity, or your hard-earned peace to anyone simply because they share your blood. True loyalty cannot be inherited. It must be earned. If the people at your table are looking at you like a meal, flip the table and walk away. If you believe that loyalty is about character, not DNA, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where justice is served ice cold.